So, one thing I've been wanting to talk about more on the podcast is about music. I mean, if you're paying attention to the overall channel, I think you can tell at this point that music is a pretty big part of the overall channel. The YouTube shorts, they actually kind of tend to do reasonably well. And I'm not really trying to do much of anything in particular with that. I'm just kind of trying to like match little, segments of concerts with, my best attempt at a clever title, and to just give people a taste of what it's like to see these artists live is kind of what I'm trying to accomplish there. And so then you can kind of also, I think, get a sense from that my music tastes are pretty eclectic. There's like a lot of different stuff in there. There's like a lot of, country, rock, hip hop, metal, and they're very, they're very well could be like a lot more different stuff in the near future here, depending on what just what happens to come around where I am. Um, so I do want to talk a little bit about some music today, and I saw something that was honestly just it couldn't be ignored. As much as I would kind of actually like to, I'd almost prefer to ignore, this Beyonce Cowboy Carter, Beyonce Knowles. Uh, just no, not doing that's not doing anything for me. Never, like definitely not. And the thing about that kind of strikes me is that it's a little bit unusual in the sense that I actually do like to see artists from other genres jump over and do a little bit of country music. And I like to see country music artists jump over and do a little bit of music from other genres. And whenever that happens, there's always some artists that get it, and there's some artists that just don't. And one of the artists that, quite frankly, just doesn't get it is Beyonce Knowles. Cowboy Carter, Beyonce Knowles. Oh, good God, piss off with that shit. So she's taken this, what she's calling a country act, on the road, and apparently she's not drawing the kind of crowds that she thought that she was going to draw. Her it seems like her seems like that the ticket sales for her country music tour are really dragging. And unfortunately, she cannot seem to take any kind of responsibility on herself for why that is. And so she came out. She said that it's racism. It's because of racism. It's because these country music fans are racist, and that's why they won't come see me do what I'm calling country music. And there hasn't been a bigger load of bullshit since Lady Antebellum decided that they were going to steal some black jazz singer's name. That whole thing. I actually mentioned that in an earlier podcast, and I think that I actually have successfully not listened to them even once since they tried to do that really like that sad, just grotesque what they did to that woman. Awful. But anyhow, so Beyonce Knowles thinks that her music isn't resonating with country music audiences because of racism. And if that were the case, well, then I've got some serious questions for her about the kind of success that Post Malone has been having with his country album, which, by the way, absolutely cooks. Like, it is amazing. Like, if you haven't gotten it yet, get it. It is outstanding. It is worth every penny. And it doesn't really seem like she must not have an answer for the kind of success that Kane Brown has had in country music. Might not have much of an answer for Charlie Pride, I suppose. The new man in black, as Big and Rich called him. Even up here in Canada, I mean, I think that he does get discriminated against in country radio, but not because of the color of his skin. But we have Jojo Mason up here in Canada. He's a great songwriter, absolutely amazing songwriter. I think that he's not as great a singer live as he is on record, but on record, he's he's great on record. And so he could have been he could be tremendously successful in the States if he wasn't a Canadian artist. You know, aside from a couple of outliers here or there, you know, American country radio, they do not want to play Canadian artists for some reason. You know, unless you're Shania Twain and you got a great nice pair of and you got a nice and you're going to shake it around in a music video, well, then they'll play you. Otherwise, you're not going to do so great on American radio. Unfortunately, that's just kind of how that is. But the thing that Post Malone did, I mean, Post Malone in particular, I'm going to focus in on him. It's Kane Brown. He's just a great country artist, like from the inception of his entire career. It's what he's done for his entire career. But when Post Malone did it, he's a crossover artist. You know, at this particular time, I think that he's actually doing a stadium tour right now, if I'm not mistaken. Unfortunately, he's not coming anywhere close to where I am, which is too bad because I would absolutely love to go see Post Malone. But anyhow, what Post Malone did as a crossover artist that is so far beyond what Beyonce Knowles has done is that he has actually shown respect to the country music traditions. You know, he didn't take his previous music and just try to shoehorn it into a country sound the way that Beyonce Knowles did. I mean, her song Texas Hold'em is maybe one of the most obnoxious things that I have ever heard try to get passed off as country music. And I mean that word like I've chosen that word quite specific, quite carefully, quite deliberately. Like that song is obnoxious. And if she had done something like that with her usual sound that she usually had, well then maybe it would have been fine. But country music is not supposed to be obnoxious. You know, country music is supposed to be relatable. It's supposed to be personable. You know, it's supposed to be about, real things that people actually really experience, during their lives, during their day-to-day life. And that's what Post Malone was able to accomplish with that record, and he largely did it by reaching out to the existing country music uh, base of artists and working with them and kind of welcoming them into the studio to help him craft this country album to make sure that there was authenticity to it. And the interesting thing about that is that he did that, but there are a couple sounds on that album, there are a couple songs in that album that he does just on his own. And they actually kind of prove that while he succeeded very much in doing that, he does have the ability to get to that place on his own with the songs that he wrote and performed entirely on his own. Now, I'm not going to say that absolutely nobody has looked at that and said, looked at that whole thing and said, it's like, it's country music, but he's a black guy. I'm sure that, yeah, I mean, people are people, and some people just are what they are. And there are people that are very much like that. I mean, not denied, seen, but you look at the amount of success that he's had, and those people are much fewer and further between than what Beyonce Knowles seems to think, based on the response to what she's offered as country music. And so what was the difference? Well, the difference is that she just kind of showed up with her usual, let's say, style of flair, and thought that she was just going to push that into the country music market, throw some guitars on there and some banjos and maybe some steel guitar or whatever, and try to country fry it a little bit, and then try to push it off as country music. And that doesn't work. That works for a different genre. That works for R&B. That works for hip hop. That works for R&B. Doesn't do it for country music, because that's not what country music is about. But of course, like, nobody's going to tell her that. And because there's so much inauthenticity in the award circuit these days, that's driven so much by by certain people, the amount of power that they have within the industry, rather than how good the music that they make is. I think that she does have a few different. I think she does have a couple of awards that maybe even suggest to her that no, it's the audience that's wrong. But you know what? I mean, even Reba McEntire. I mean, Reba McEntire is probably one of the farthest things from like your old school, you know, old school, staunchly conservative redneck type of country music artist. And even she said, it's like, no, this doesn't wash it. You're just, you're just. Oh, God, I wish I could remember the specific quote that she said because it was pretty good. But it was just something like, you're putting Daisy Dukes on like a. You're like putting Daisy Dukes on a sheep and then having it sing in the barn and pretending like that's country music. Oh, it was, it was something like that, and it was pretty good. But that was exactly the point. And nobody is saying that about Post Malone. And the thing is that if you weren't going to look at Post Malone and say that, oh well, he's a black guy trying to do country music, it's like, well, even if you weren't going to say that, people could say, oh, he's a guy with a face tattoo. He's a guy with a few face tattoos trying to do country music. And he's got his teeth iced a little bit. He's a guy with face tattoos and icy teeth trying to do country music. Nobody's saying that about him because the music is speaking for itself. And his music, his country music album has been so damn good. Like he needs to do another. I feel like that's not going to happen right away. I feel like he's probably going to go back to doing, his hip hop R&B stuff for a little while after this, and he definitely should do that because he's got a lot of fans there. But he does have a lot of fans in this country music genre now too. And after a while, they're going to be wanting another one. I think it's kind of a shame that we're going to have to wait as long as we're going to have to wait to get it. But absolutely nobody's going to be sitting around waiting for another Beyonce Knowles country album. And no, it's got absolutely nothing to do with racism. Sorry, Beyonce. You're going to have to think of another excuse. Or better yet, maybe show some respect to the genre.